In the summer of 1943, as Italy's fascist empire crumbled and Mussolini's power slipped through his fingers, a desperate operation began in secret. Under the cover of darkness, guarded by elite black-shirt units and whispered about only among the highest ranks, ships were loaded with gold bars, jewels, and state treasures. The financial lifeline, Mussolini, hoped would rebuild his shattered regime from exile. Their destination, neutral Spain, where friendly fascist networks waited to receive the treasure. But those ships never arrived. Some vanished in storms that were never recorded. Others sent brief, frantic radio signals before falling silent forever. A few wrecks have been found split open on the seafloor, their holds empty. Others remain missing, swallowed by the Mediterranean. Rumors spread of German interference, Allied codebreakers, betrayal from within Mussolini's own circle. And then there were the whispers that the treasure fleet carried something far more valuable than gold. This is the story of the Italian gold fleet, the treasure that sailed into the chaos of war, and the ships that never reached their shores. Italy in 1943 was a nation on the edge of ruin, once promised empire, victory, and glory. The country now found itself suffocating under the weight of Mussolini's ambition. The deserts of North Africa were lost. Sicily had fallen. Allied bombers roared over Rome with alarming ease. And inside the fascist Grand Council, knives were already being sharpened. The regime that once claimed it would resurrect the Roman Empire was collapsing in real time. Factories stood silent. Oil reserves were gone. Inflation soared. And, most dangerously of all, Italy's gold reserves, the backbone of the national economy, were evaporating. Mussolini understood the truth better than anyone. The war was lost, and his power was slipping beyond recovery. But he refused to go down with the wreckage. If Italy fell, he needed a lifeline, a way to rebuild a government in exile, arm loyal forces, and re-emerge as the leader of a resurrected fascist movement. That lifeline had to be gold in secret meetings inside the Palazzo Venezia. Mussolini's inner circle drafted a desperate plan, a transfer of state gold, jewels, and foreign currency to neutral Spain, where Franco's fascist regime would protect it. Spain, still recovering from its civil war, was sympathetic to Mussolini and willing to look the other way for a price. But banking channels were no longer safe. The Allies monitored every transaction. The Vatican's diplomatic networks were compromised. And German allies were becoming dangerous overseers. So the Duce approved an alternative: transport the treasure by sea, using small convoys of civilian and military vessels that could blend into the chaotic wartime traffic of the Mediterranean. It was a plan built on secrecy and fear. Gold bars were quietly transferred from the Bank of Italy to coastal warehouses, under the guise of relocation for safekeeping. Crates filled with gems seized from Ethiopia and private collections were stamped with false agricultural labels. Suitcases containing fascist party funds were handed to naval officers sworn to silence, and as Mussolini's enemies closed in, the timetable accelerated. On July 24, 1943, the fascist Grand Council voted to remove him. The next day, he was arrested. Italy was leaderless. The nation was in chaos, and the treasure plan was suddenly a race against time. Even under arrest, Mussolini's loyalists moved quickly. Orders were already in place. The ships had already been chosen. Crews had already been briefed in vague but urgent language. Gold does not wait for politics. The convoys prepared to sail from La Spezia, Genoa, and smaller Ligurian ports. Their routes were laid out carefully, hugging coastlines, slipping through narrow channels under cloud cover, avoiding British naval patrol zones tracked through intercepted radio chatter. It was a mission designed to be invisible. But in 1943, nothing in the Mediterranean went unnoticed. The Italians were not the only ones listening. The British at Bletchley Park had cracked numerous Italian naval codes. The Germans, now occupying half the country, suspected their ally of retreating into betrayal. Spanish intelligence, notoriously corrupt, leaked information to anyone who paid that the Italian gold fleet was no longer a secret. It was a target, and the Mediterranean, a graveyard of ships, waited. The Italian regime knew the walls were closing in. Germany, once the guarantor of fascist survival, was now dragging Italy down with it. In Rome, Mussolini spoke boldly, but in the map rooms beneath the Palazzo Venezia, voices whispered about the inevitable. The war was lost. Only the consequences remained. And consequences for a collapsing dictatorship were always lethal, so the plan sharpened. The gold had to move. It had to leave the peninsula before the Allies reached the northern ports or the partisans tightened their control of the rail lines. Spain seemed ideal, a sympathetic, neutral country with ports still open to Axis ships. And if the gold reached Franco's shores, the regime could buy exile, weapons for a comeback, or simply time to survive underground. But the Mediterranean was no longer Mussolini's sea. Allied aircraft dominated the skies. British submarines stalked the shipping lanes. Even Italy's own sailors were divided, some loyal, some quietly preparing to defect. Every harbor became a potential trap. Still, the order was given. Cargo manifests were rewritten. Naval officers received sealed envelopes with unexplained instructions. And in several ports, La Spezia, Genoa, Trieste, cranes quietly lowered heavy, unmarked crates into the holds of small, fast vessels. Crews were told nothing, but they noticed armed guards standing closer than usual, watching every movement. The gold fleet was forming. Not a grand armada, but a desperate string of shadowed ships, a final gamble disguised as routine transport. Their mission was simple: slip out of Italy before sunrise, cross a war-torn sea, and deliver the wealth that Mussolini hoped would buy his future. None of them knew the truth: that the sea waiting ahead was already hunting them to understand why Mussolini's gold fleet never reached Spain. You have to follow the currents of fear running through Italy in 1943. Every faction, the Allies, the Germans, the partisans, and even rival fascists, had reasons to chase or sabotage those ships. Each saw the treasure not as gold, but as power. From the Allied perspective, Italian gold leaving the peninsula meant the Axis could prolong its resistance. British intelligence believed the shipment might fund German counterattacks in northern Italy or bribe neutral governments. They had already intercepted whispers of unusual Italian naval movements, encrypted messages hinting at priority cargo and frantic activity near La Spezia. To them, any mysterious vessel slipping toward Spain became a potential threat. But the Germans had their own motives. As Italy crumbled, Berlin no longer trusted Mussolini or his officers. The Reich viewed Italian treasure as payment compensation for divisions lost on the Eastern Front. For fuel diverted to the Mediterranean, 4 German troops now dying to hold Italian ground. To some commanders, the gold belonged to Germany, not Italy, and they intended to seize it before Italy defected. The Wehrmacht had agents embedded in the ports. They watched closely, waited, and reported every crate loaded under darkness. Then there were the partisans, scattered, underarmed but fiercely motivated. They knew that if Mussolini escaped with millions in gold, the regime could be reborn in exile. Rumors spread through the resistance. Treasure ships were being prepared, guarded heavily, departing soon. For the partisans, stopping them wasn't about wealth. It was about preventing fascism from surviving the war. Inside Italy's own navy, loyalties fractured. Some officers remained devoted to the Duce, believing the gold shipment would secure Italy's future. Others quietly informed the Allies. A few passed intelligence to the partisans. In a single fleet, Three different agendas moved under the same uniform. This was the battle surrounding the gold. One fought not on open seas, but in silence, betrayal, and shadows. Before the first vessel even left port, the fleet was already surrounded by enemies. When the gold finally began moving toward the water, the secrecy that protected it also doomed it. No one had the full picture, not even the men loading the crates, but enough fragments leaked into the world to turn the Mediterranean into a silent trap. The Allies had cracked portions of Italian naval codes. Messages that seemed routine suddenly carried hints of urgency, altered shipping routes. New departure times, vague references to special cargo. British analysts couldn't see the gold, but they could feel its weight in the patterns. Submarines were quietly redeployed. Patrol aircraft were given new reconnaissance grids. Anything leaving the northern Italian ports became a target of interest. German intelligence moved even faster. Berlin interpreted Italy's secrecy as betrayal. To them, the gold wasn't being evacuated, it was being hidden. Plans were drawn up to intercept the ships before they reached open water. Some German naval units prepared to shadow the vessels. Others were ordered to seize them altogether once Italy's surrender became official. As one officer noted in a report, Italy intends to flee the war with our assets in its hold. Inside Mussolini's inner circle, paranoia sharpened every decision. The Duce knew he could trust neither the Germans nor the Allies. Even some fascist officials whispered that the gold should be divided, or moved overland, or concealed in the mountains until victory or collapse. No plan survived more than a few days. Every conversation felt like treason waiting to happen. Meanwhile, the Italian Navy prepared to escort what they believed were standard military transports. But captains noticed unusual restrictions, sealed navigation orders. No radio transmissions, armed guards stationed near the cargo holds. Sailors who asked questions were dismissed or transferred. Those who understood the truth said nothing because anyone who spoke openly about gold risked being silenced before the ships ever sailed. By the time the vessels slipped out into the Mediterranean darkness, they were no longer just transports. They were symbols of Mussolini's desperation, of Germany's suspicion, of the Allies' surveillance, and of Italy's fractured identity. Every ripple they made on the water was watched by someone. The fleet continued forward, unaware that the sea ahead had already chosen its hunters. The gold fleet left port under a sky without stars. No fanfare, no signals. Only the low thrum of engines pushing against a black, uneasy sea. Every captain knew the rules. No lights, no radio, no questions. The ships were to move like shadows, unseen, unheard, untraceable. But shadows don't hide from everything. As the vessels crept south along the Italian coastline, the Mediterranean revealed its first hunter. A British submarine patrolling on an intelligence hunch picked up faint propeller signatures. They didn't match the standard traffic patterns. They were cautious, staggered, irregular, the movement of ships trying not to be found. The submarine tracked them silently, sending a single coded message into the dark. Suspicious convoy sighted. For the Italian crews, the first sign of danger came as a distant flash. A bloom of light on the horizon, followed by a low, rolling thunder that spread across the water. The men froze. Another flash, then another. It wasn't lightning. It was depth charges. The escort commander ordered evasive maneuvers, unsure whether they were being hunted, warned, or merely observed. The ships tightened their formation, pushing faster through the narrow channel. But speed brought risk. The faster they moved, the louder they became, and they were not the only ones listening. German naval intelligence had already dispatched monitoring vessels, a polite term for predators sent to watch their own ally. These ships were under orders to intercept if Italy surrendered, and Berlin had reason to believe surrender was imminent. They closed in slowly, staying just outside visual range, waiting for confirmation that Mussolini's regime had fallen. When that message arrived, the gold would become German property. Inside the Italian bridge rooms, tension grew unbearable. Radios were silent, but the world around them was speaking clearly. Italy was collapsing. Allies were hunting them. Germans were behind them. Every man on those ships now understood the truth. They were not carrying cargo. They were carrying a motive, a reason for every faction in the war to pull the trigger. And then, as the fleet reached the open waters near Sardinia, a new signal arrived, one that changed everything. A coded transmission from Rome, rushed, unstable, almost frantic. Italy had signed the armistice. The men stared at the decode sheet in disbelief. In a single moment, they were no longer part of a nation at war. They were fugitives in the middle of the sea, surrounded by enemies who, only hours ago, had been allies, and all of them wanted what lay in the hold. The moment the armistice was announced, the sea changed character. The same waves that had concealed the gold fleet now exposed it. Every ship carrying Mussolini's treasure had just become a prize, and every armed vessel nearby, friend or foe, suddenly had a reason to claim it. The German monitoring ships were the first to act. As soon as Berlin confirmed Italy's surrender, coded orders flashed across the Mediterranean. Secure Italian assets. Seize all strategic cargo. To the Germans, the gold was not merely wealth. It was repayment, a final extraction from a collapsing ally. Their vessels accelerated, closing the distance with predatory precision. The Italian captains received no guidance. Rome had fallen into chaos. The navy was splitting apart, some obeying the king's new orders, others still waiting for Mussolini, others simply trying to survive. The gold fleet, caught between loyalties, was left with a single option: run. Engines roared. Bows lifted. The ships pushed toward open water, hoping distance would save them. But the Germans were faster. Searchlights pierced the night, raking across the waves. When the white cone of light found the last escort ship, it froze like prey caught under a hunter's gaze. A warning shot followed. Not a miss. A message, then the sea erupted. A British submarine, tracking the chaos from below, had been waiting for confirmation. Once it detected the German vessels preparing to engage Italian ships, the situation shifted. Britain's objective was simple: prevent the gold from reaching fascist hands, German or Italian. Torpedoes launched silently, slicing through the water toward the largest German ship. The explosion hit like a hammer. A column of fire erupted from the darkness. The shockwave slammed into the Italian convoy, sending sailors stumbling across the deck. In seconds, the careful secrecy of Mussolini's plan dissolved into a three-way firefight. The Germans returned fire. The Italians zigzagged, unsure who the enemy even was. Searchlights danced over the waves. Gunfire flashed in broken rhythms. Radio silence shattered as panicked officers demanded orders from commands that no longer existed. The smallest transport, one of the ships carrying gold, took a direct hit. The blast tore open the hull. Water surged in. Sailors shouted that the cargo hold was flooding. Wooden crates split, spilling ingots that clattered across the metal floor before sliding into the rising water. Within minutes, the ship listed, groaned, and slipped beneath the surface. Dragging millions in gold with it, another vessel tried to escape toward the Spanish coast, but found itself cornered by German fast attack boats, surrounded, outgunned, and leaderless. Its captain ordered the cargo dumped overboard rather than let the Reich take it. Box after box vanished into the dark sea, swallowed before the Germans boarded. By dawn, the fleet had shattered. Some ships surrendered. Some were sunk. Some vanished into the fog, their fates recorded only in rumor. But one truth became clear. The gold Mussolini hoped would secure his future would never reach. Spain. The Mediterranean had claimed it. and the war had consumed its secret. When the sun finally rose over the Mediterranean, it illuminated not a fleet, but the scattered remains of one. Oil slicks drifted across the surface. Splintered wood bobbed between twisted sheets of metal. A few lifeboats floated silently, their survivors too exhausted or stunned to speak. The night that was meant to carry Mussolini's gold to safety had ended with the sea swallowing its secret in Rome. The collapse was absolute. The armistice shattered what remained of fascist authority. Commanders fled. Ministries emptied. Paperwork burned in courtyards. No one in the new Italian government could say precisely how much gold had been loaded onto the secret fleet or how many ships had actually carried it. Records were scattered, falsified, or deliberately destroyed. Some officials denied the operation ever existed. Others whispered privately that the loss of the gold had doomed any hope of Mussolini rebuilding power in exile. Across the Mediterranean, new stories began forming. British reports celebrated a successful disruption of hostile assets, though they never publicly acknowledged the value of what sank. German intelligence blamed Italian treachery, insisting the gold was hidden, not lost. Partisans circulated the story as proof that fascism had crumbled under its own greed. Each faction shaped the narrative to suit its victory. Meanwhile, salvagers, fishermen, and naval patrols across Sardinia and Corsica reported strange sightings. Crates drifting miles from known shipping lanes, fragments of Italian uniforms, and the occasional glint of metal in shallow waters. No official investigation followed. The war was moving too quickly, and Europe had more urgent fires to put out. For the handful of sailors who survived, the memory stayed sharp. The explosions, the chaos, the crates breaking open as the ship listed, the weight of gold sliding across the deck like a living thing. Many of them tried to explain what they had witnessed, but their accounts were dismissed, buried, or lost in the noise of a nation restructuring itself under Allied control. The Mediterranean, as always, kept the truth quiet. In the months that followed, the legend of Mussolini's gold began to drift farther from the facts, just as the crates themselves had drifted from the sinking ships. With Italy now split between German occupation in the north and Allied advance in the south, the truth became a casualty of war. Rumor filled the gaps where records had burned. Some claimed the Germans recovered a portion of the treasure, hauling crates from the water under armed guard, before shipping them north through the Brenner Pass. Others swore that local fishermen discovered a few ingots tangled in their nets, evidence that the gold lay in shallow waters, not lost in the deep. And in the bars of Sardinia, sailors traded stories of divers who vanished after searching the wrecks, fueling speculation that the gold was still out there, waiting under layers of sand and silence. For the Allies, the gold quickly turned into a footnote. Their focus shifted toward the final defeat of Nazi Germany, and the gold fleet, never officially acknowledged, was quietly archived in classified reports. When historians later asked about the operation, most officials could only shrug. Wartime secrecy had succeeded too well. Even those who had intercepted the fleet didn't know exactly what they had. Stopped post-war Italy faced an uncomfortable question. Had the gold really been on those ships at all? With Mussolini captured, executed, and his regime dismantled, no surviving official could verify the final manifests. Some argued the crates carried only military payrolls or industrial materials. Others insisted the gold was split between ships, hidden in different ports, or smuggled over land before the fleet even sailed. The conflicting testimonies created a mystery that historians still chase today, but beneath all theories runs the same quiet truth. Something valuable was moved. Something was lost, and something never reached Spain. In the end, the Mediterranean became the final vault. A cold one, a silent one, a vault without signatures, records, or doors, And for more than 80 years, its currents have guarded Mussolini's last gamble, preserving the unanswered question at the heart of the story: how much gold truly lies beneath the waves? And how much was taken before the world ever knew it was there? The story of the Italian gold fleet is more than a tale of treasure lost at sea. It is a story of desperation, ambition, and the chaos that accompanies the collapse of power. Mussolini's gold was never just wealth. It was the last lifeline for a regime already crumbling under the weight of war, rebellion, and betrayal. For decades, the Mediterranean has kept its silence. Ships sank, crates vanished, and survivors carried memories too fragmented to be fully believed. Yet the legend endured. It speaks to something deeper than lost bullion: the consequences of greed, the fragility of loyalty, and the human cost of power pursued at any price. Historians continue to search archives, declassified reports, and eyewitness accounts. Divers comb the seabed. Researchers debate whether the treasure was ever fully aboard the fleet or if some portions slipped overland before the chaos. But the gold, whether sunk or stolen, has become secondary. The true story lies in the choices, betrayals, and fear that surrounded it. The way a nation's final act can ripple across oceans and decades. The Italian gold fleet reminds us that history is never only about what survives. It is about what is hidden, what is lost, and what we continue to question. It teaches that even in defeat, ambition endures, and legends grow from the shadows left by human folly. Today, the Mediterranean holds its secret quietly, while the story sails on through memory and myth. The gold may never be recovered, but the tale itself is a treasure of history, a warning, a mystery, and a testament to a world in upheaval. In the end, Mussolini's fleet is more than a sunken convoy. It is a mirror reflecting the dangers of desperation, the weight of lost ambition, and the enduring power of legend. The treasure may be gone, but the story remains, waiting for those willing to dive into the depths of history and confront the truths. Hidden beneath its waves,